Hi everyone, thanks again for joining us for our webcast. If you missed the little housekeeping that we went over before, just going to repeat a couple things. All attendees have been muted, so if you have a question or any technical issues, feel free to type in the chat or question box. We're going to address all the questions at the end of the presentation. Finally, this webcast is being recorded, and it will be posted to our website as well as our YouTube channel. So today we have a webcast focused on the multi-company functionalities of Dynamics NAV. And we have Diana Harvey and Mary Carrero who are presenting. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to go over consolidations and intercompany in our webcast today. And what's in it for me? We're going to show you how to go through the consolidations, and then I'm going to turn it over to Diana, who will go over the intercompany portion. Now, consolidating means combining the financial statements of two or more separate companies or subsidiaries into a consolidated financial statement. In NAV, each individual company involved in a consolidation is called a business unit. The combined company is called the consolidated company, and it's usually a company set up just for this purpose. It doesn't hold any normal business transactions. So as you see here, you can consolidate across different charts of accounts with different fiscal years in your companies, either full amounts or any percentage of a company's financial information, companies with different currencies, and you can also use different methods of translating individual GL accounts. For the companies, you can use companies that are in the same database or in other NAV databases, and you can even consolidate companies in other accounting and business management programs. And it does use XML format. If your financial statement of a business unit are in different currencies than those of the consolidated company, you have to set up exchange rates for the consolidation. And in NAV, the consolidation features of the program allow you to set up a list of companies that you're going to consolidate. You can verify the accounting data before consolidating. You can import files and databases, and it also allows you to generate consolidating reports. So now we're going to go into our NAV system. Before you can perform a consolidation, you must create a consolidated company in your NAV database. We've already done that. The company must be set up like any company in the program. It has to have its own chart of accounts. This chart of accounts is totally independent of the chart of accounts in the other business units or the companies you're going to consolidate from, and it may differ from one company to another. So for our webinar purposes today, we've created the consolidation company already, as you see here. We're going to also use the Cronus USA and the Cronus Canada companies. So what we want to do first, after your consolidated company is created, is we're going to go into our USA company. You must go into the chart of accounts. And if you don't see the columns already, you want to pull in your consolidated debit and credit accounts. This is where you're going to map your chart of accounts from your USA company into what you're going to put it in the consolidated company. We're also going to do the same thing in the Canada company. And then that way you can see how the currencies work in the consolidation. So I've done this in both companies already. And once your chart of accounts is ready, then we're going to go back to the consolidated company. And we're going to create our business units, which, if you remember, are the companies that we're going to consolidate the data from. So I've already created those. And what you do is you open up the business unit card and you create your code. You name your company. You select it from your list. If your company, such as the USA here, is the same currency as your consolidated company, you can leave that blank. You do your currency exchange rate table. You check the consolidate box. This basically turns it on. Here's where you determine the percentage of the consolidation for this company. You have starting and ending dates. This will tell the consolidated company at what point to start. So if your USA company has been open for a while and you've been using it and you only want to start consolidations on a specific date, you put that in there. Ending date is pretty similar when you want to stop consolidating it. Then you have your data source and your file format. And then at the bottom you can see we've entered in the GL accounts for our gains and losses. So you do this for both companies or all companies you want to consolidate from. You'll notice in the Canada one we did have to put the currency code because my consolidation company is in the US dollars. Okay, so then once that is done, if it's your first time, you want to run a test database. If you import the databases right now and you have any issues, it's going to throw you the errors one at a time as you come across them. So the first time is good to do the test database. What it does is going to run through your system and it's going to throw out the errors in a report format. And as you can see here, I don't have any errors, so that tells me I've done it. You can pull your list, you can correct any errors on your accounts, come back and run it again. When you have no more errors, then it's time to go ahead and run the consolidation. A couple things to consider before running your consolidation. You should make sure that your exchange rate is up to date, and you typically want to have your month closed in the companies that you're consolidating. This is usually done as your last step of your process for the month end. So once this is done, you're going to go into one of the companies. You can consolidate all your companies at one time, but keep in mind that if something happens and you need to rerun a consolidation, you would have to redo them all at the same time. If you run them one at a time, you can then just reconsolidate that one company if you have an issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Import Database. And here we're going to pick, I've already done June in this database, so we're going to start with July. And then in the document number, you'll notice I have included the code of USA, and then I'm going to put the date. This will help you differentiate the transactions, and you'll see in a second. And then down here, because we're only doing one company, we're going to limit this to just the USA. And then you click OK. It's going to ask you if you want to consolidate, and you just say yes. And then once it's done, we're going to go look at the general ledger entries. And we're going to filter by our date. And you'll see there are our transactions for our consolidation. So then what we can do once that one's done, we know it's right, we can go back into Canada. You can go into Navigate, and if you want to change your rate here, you can do it manually before you run the consolidation. And then you just come over to the actions, import your database, same thing. And now what we're going to do with this one is we're going to change it to Canada, and then we'll come down here and select the Canadian company and run this one as well. So now it's processed that. Let's go look at our general ledger entries. And if we select our value, you can now see with that document number, you can easily differentiate between the USA and the Canada. It also shows what the percentage of consolidation is for the company, and then it also shows your exchange rate. Okay, so those are now consolidated. If for some reason I say my exchange rate on Canada is wrong and I need to change it and rerun it, what NAV will do is it will delete out this one and it will replace it with the new one you're going to run, or you run. Now you don't have to do these at the same time. If for some reason you have closed out your USA company, say on the 2nd of the month, and you want to consolidate at that point, you can. And then whenever you get your Canadian company done, say it's the 5th of the month, you can consolidate that at that point in time. So now we're going to go look at reporting real quick, just so I can show you that. And what you'll notice here is that we have consolidated trial balances. And this one has a 4 on it, this one doesn't. What this means is basically if you have 4 or less consolidated companies, you can just run this one, and you'll see here in a second. Let me change the date so we can pick up ours. And we will preview it. And you notice it has a Canadian company and a USA company. They're separated for you, and then they're totaled. Okay. The other thing you can do is do an account schedule. And what I've done in here is created one called Consolidated Income Statement. We're running it by the business units. And if you come in and edit your column layout, you see I've put USA and Canada and the total. And then you can just do an overview here. And it shows you the different columns for USA and Canada as well. Now, you can do dimensions in your consolidations. We didn't do it for time constraints on the webinar, but basically if you're going to run dimensions through this, you have to make sure that all dimensions that you want in consolidation exist in that company from both of the companies. And that's all I have for consolidation. I'm going to now turn it over to Diana for the intercompany portion. Thank you all.
Good morning. I am going to talk to you today about intercompany. So I want to kind of just go over some of the information regarding intercompany before we actually get into it. The intercompany functionality will increase productivity as a result of time saved and simplified transactions. It eliminates or minimizes the error because the system will actually enforce that the transactions be done on both sides of the fence. You can do a complete audit trail, full visibility into the business activities, permissions can be added to it, and it does allow information to be generated out to different companies, but not necessarily from one company to another if the person's not allowed to do that. That will allow you to allocate just expenses out or also sell and buy between the two companies or multiple companies. All right, so some of the transactions that you can do in multiple companies are general journal entries, purchase and sales orders, invoices, the credit memos, and return orders for actual documents or entries. So what we're going to talk about in the demo is actually just doing a little bit of the setup that's involved, allocating out expenses. This is probably why intercompany is done, the most popular reason, and also doing some journal entries, and then we will sell some inventory up between the two companies. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my nav. So what I did in my nav here is I created a menu option called intercompany just to group some of the information together. You don't have that as a standard option in your system, but we certainly can easily add a menu option to the navigation pane. That is something that the end user can do. So I added that, and I also added some features to the ribbon. So if you don't see it in your system, that's why. It's because I've added it. So anything that you're looking for, as you want to search for it, you want to do IC for intercompany, not actually intercompany. So in your search box, search for the IC for partners, chart of accounts and dimensions. So the first thing that is normally set up is determining what companies are going to do transactions among other companies. All right, so there's not necessarily one company that then does the multi-company out to other companies. You can do intercompany transactions among all your companies. So in my system here, I have 4 companies: Arizona, Canada, Mexico, and United States. So to keep it simple, I'm not doing any intercompany transactions between Mexico, but Arizona, Canada, and US can do intercompany transactions among each other. So I am in the US company, so I set up Arizona and Canada as my intercompany transaction or partners that I'm going to intercompany with. I'm going to go ahead and edit the Arizona one here. So I just put in a code, I put in the name, I have the type of information. Is it coming from an email, another file location? So you can actually, just like consolidations, you can intercompany with an outside company if you needed to, and then also do the database. So database internally just means I'm internally doing it within another company. So I'm picking Arizona there. I can block it. So if in the future you decide not to do intercompany, you can block that information. Then we have where we set up a receivables and a payables account when I'm dealing with this particular company. So within my chart of accounts, I have a customers intercompany and I have a vendors intercompany. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay. So I did the same thing for Canada. And the only thing I did differently with Canada was I added the currency code. So once again, it'll move the information by the currency codes as if we were actually entering the transaction in that other company. So my intercompany partner coding, Arizona is always going to be intercompany P02, Canada's always intercompany P03. So P01 is the United States. They also are assigned a code internally. I won't go through all the setup. There is quite a bit of setup, and so it's one of those things we normally work with the end user if they're going to actually set up intercompany so they can see that it's processed. So the next area I want to talk about is just going to be the intercompany chart of accounts. So the way I normally explain this is this chart of accounts, so the information on the left-hand side, this is a global chart of accounts that sits out there. That's the chart of accounts that your individual companies will point to when they're doing an intercompany transaction. So this map to the GL account number, this is mapping to the GL accounts within the United States company itself. So real quickly here, I'm going to go over to Arizona. This is a little bit easier to understand when you actually have a chart of account that is a bit different. So I'm going to go into my intercompany, go to intercompany chart of accounts. Now you'll notice I have a chart of accounts here, but I don't have everything mapped. All right, so if I scroll down, I have a few GL account numbers mapped there, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. So these are the only accounts that I have set up within my Arizona company that I am going to do intercompany transactions against. So you don't actually have to set up the whole chart of accounts, and this actually has a different chart of account numbers. So you'll notice there are only 4 digits versus 5 digits. So this is my Arizona column, same as when I'm in the US or the Canada, I'm mapping to that chart of accounts. This on the left-hand side, this is a global chart of accounts. So this allows you actually to have different GL accounts within all your companies and then make, in a sense, a consolidating intercompany chart of account to map to. And once again, you can block it if you needed to. So you do have the ability to export out the chart of accounts and then import it back in. So there's an import-export, so you don't have to retype this in each of your individual companies. And then there is a way to do an automatic mapping. So in Canada and the US, they match identically. So I just said map to the same account number, and in Arizona, I had to individually add some transactions in. Let me go back to my US company. And I'm going to go back down here to my intercompany. So that's the information on the chart of accounts. If something's missing when it's attempting to do an intercompany transaction, it'll give you an error message. So I'm going to go down here to intercompany dimensions. So the same thing, there's a lot of setup if you're dealing with dimensions. This is probably the trickiest area of all, is that if you're going to send dimensions from one company to the other, or they're required on the other side, you sometimes have to add some dimensions maybe to the US that you don't use in Canada, but because we're going to push data over, they need to be able to enter that information on the Canadian side. So sometimes it's just easier if we're dealing with dimensions that we map everything to all the companies. But obviously it's one of those that if you're setting this up, review your dimensions and the requirements that are needed. So once again, I have my dimensions. I have the ability to map them with the same code. So this is intercompany dimensions mapped to the dimensions within my individual company. Then I have the ability to copy from the dimensions, and I can navigate to the values. So you can see down to the individual values, I also have them mapped to a dimension value code. And then if I go to my regular dimensions, they are mapped to intercompany dimensions. And that's probably why this is the trickiest of all the setups, is the dimension, to make sure everything is mapped appropriately. So that does take a little bit of time. And I'm going to go back here to the chart of accounts, and I'm going to just pick an account number. Here, I'm going to go to the GL account card. So one of the other options you have is to default an intercompany partner GL account number. So if you're doing journal entries, you can associate what it should default to also. If you're normally just making it the same account number from one company to the other, you know what it is, you can type it in. So a lot of clients don't go to this extent to default it in here, but you do have the ability to add defaults. So as I always say with NAV, setup is what sometimes does you in. The actual processing of something is very simple. All right, so those are the intercompany partners, the chart of accounts, and then the dimensions. So those are the 3 areas of setup. It's done within each company, and then, like I said, there's some additional setup if you're going to become an intercompany partner itself. So the most common use of intercompany is just to allocate expenses out. So we're going to do the first one, the most common one first. So I'm going to go here to, once again, I'm still in my USA company. I'm going to go to purchase invoices. I'm going to go ahead and I already created one just to save a little bit of time. So I created one, I got an invoice in from AR Day Property Management. The total of the invoice that the US company owes them is $2,600. So if I come down here, I put in for some cleaning that they did, but I want to actually allocate out some of that expense to the other companies. So the first one here is my Arizona company. So I'm allocating of that $2,600, $500. And to Canada, I'm allocating $600. And I chose my intercompany partner code is actually going to be, should be that number there, because it's it's the GL account number. So where my Arizona chart of account number is 4 digits, but this is actually that intercompany GL chart of account number. So what is the GL account number that marries my transactions together? All right, so I'm allocating it to this expense accounts. I'm going to allocate it to that for my intercompany expense accounts. And then the US company has $1,500. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and post this. And then I'm going to go down to my posted document area. I'm going to go to my GL registers. I'm going to go to the last one created, and I'm going to take a look at the GL ledger. So right here, I have $2,600 that went to my expense account for cleaning, the $65,100. It offset to my vendor for $22,300 because I owe AR Day Management $2,600. Then it comes down here and it did an intercompany accounts receivable transaction to Arizona, the Kronos, Arizona for $500, and it offset and reduced my amount of my expense by $500 because that doesn't belong in my US company, it belongs in Arizona. And the same with this $6,500, it belongs, or $6,500 account number belongs to Canada for the $600. So the total for my expense account is going to just be the $1,500 by the time it gets done. But it shows a complete audit trail of the information going in and out of the account. So if I come back up here, I go to my chart of accounts, I put in my $65,100. I'm going to do a drill down. And I see down here the one invoice, so let me go ahead and just filter to this value. So there's my $2,600 in, the minus $500 and the minus $600. So like I said, once again, full audit trail on what's the postings taking place. So let me go back to the purchase invoice. I have another one in here. We'll go ahead and bring it up. So this purchase invoice, I'm actually not allocating any to the US. I'm paying this on behalf of the other company. So I can do that also and not have to have something post to the US side. All right, so I can just go ahead and post this. I'm going to say yes. So that posts that information, and once again, it's going to post it all out for my intercompany. So now what I need to do is actually, what NAV has done is it's posted those transactions and it's created entries that need to go to the other companies. So if I come up here under my role center, these are also icons that I added for easy access. If I'm doing intercompany, I want to have quick access to this information. So what I need to do is those transactions went to my outbox. So I'm sending them out of the US. They're going to go to the inbox of Arizona and Canada. So this allows it to have a separation of duties. So if Mary worked in Canada and I worked in the US, then I'm pushing the information to Mary, then Mary has the ability to review it and accept it, and I'm not putting transactions into her Canadian company without her knowing about it. So that's why NAV separates them and puts them into two different areas. So what I'm going to do here is I have the ability to look at the information, and I have my different intercompany partners. So I have 02, 03, 02. So the first one is dealing with that one invoice that split the information. If I want to know a little bit more about it, I can go here to navigate. I can select details, and it tells me intercompany, what account, and the amount. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay on that, and I can look at it, all of them if I wanted to, and it gives me the invoice number, when it was done, who created it, the information. So the line action over here, what I want to do is I want to set the line action. I'm going to come up here. I can do it individually if I wanted to, but I want to do it for all of them at one time. No action means no action is just they're not going to sit there. No matter what else happens, nothing's going to happen to these transactions. Okay, so maybe you're not ready to send them. Maybe you're collecting them. And Mary says, I only want them at the end of the month. I do not want them all throughout the whole month. Then you can sit there with them. All right, you can select to send them to the intercompany partner. You can return them to the inbox. All right, so if they came over from somebody else and I don't want them, I can return them back. Okay, and cancel means it's canceling the transactions and they're not going to be sent to the other company. I would not suggest that, only because you have posted them in the US company to the intercompany side of it. You want to complete the transaction. All right, so this does do an audit trail if you cancel it. So you can't cancel it and figure you're not going to get caught doing it. All right, so fair warning to everybody, Big Brother NAV knows what's going on and will know if you cancel it. But it does give you the option. If you have something that's really stuck and you cannot, for some reason, get it posted to the other side, you're having an issue, you go, forget it, I want to cancel it. I'll create credit memos on my side, cancel them, and then nothing goes to the other side. So not to say you can't do it, just be sure you know why you're not doing it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and complete the line action. It asks me if I wish to do it, and I say yes. So what it's doing now is, as long as there's no issue with the transactions, it's pushed them out of my US company. So I'm now going to go over to Canada. And I'm going to select my inbox. Now, once again, if it's a separation of duties, then it would be somebody else going into the inbox and receiving that information. All right, if you don't have a separation of duty and you're just working from within one company to the other, then you push it out of the outbox and you come over here and you go into the inbox. And the system, once again, is going to tell you what it was created by, where it came from. So there's my partner number 1. If I want to navigate down to the details, I can see what the information is. So they sent me over $600 and it's going to be to cleaning. I can look up there if I wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead here under line action, since there's one line. I'm going to go ahead and accept it. Once again, I can return it to the intercompany partner. Maybe I don't want it. I'm not in agreement that we owe $600. I can cancel it if I wanted to. Once again, you're canceling it. It's not completed. You need to make sure you follow up with everybody if you're going to cancel it. I'm going to go ahead and accept it. You can also put comments on transactions. So if you want to explain why you're sending something over, you can do that also. So I'm going to go to actions. I'm going to complete the action. So because I'm doing this as I'm bringing in the transaction, it's really coming in as a journal entry. It was an invoice in one company, but it's a journal when it hits the other company. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept it. I can change the posting date. So once again, if you are sitting there and you get a whole bunch of transactions and you want everything the last day of the month, then you can just replace the transaction date if you wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And before I get off the screen, you also have the import transaction file. So this is where you can import from another source besides importing it in from another partner. So I'm going to say OK there. So what the system has done is it's brought those entries into a journal. So it's going to offset to my intercompany partner code, and then it's going to put that expense to my cleaning supplies here. So I'm going to go ahead and post this and close this out. Now I'm going to go down to my general ledgers and I'm going to look at this. Now it tells me the source, intercompany, the default batch. If I look at the journal entries, it went to my payables account that I have set up for intercompany. So there's my vendors intercompany, and then it also went to my cleaning supplies. So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to go to Canada or to Arizona real quick, because they actually had a different GL account number. So I'm going to go to my inbox. I have both these lines here. I'm going to go ahead and set action to accept, complete the action. I'm good with all of this. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to do a general journal. So now you'll see that it goes to 6510 because I did the mapping. So when it moved out of the US, it was 65,100, but when it gets to Arizona, it's 65,10, and then I had a different GL account down here. And so once again, then I can post them and the information goes through. So that was pretty quick to put in the entries, push them out, accept them in, and hit the post button versus me rekeying that information in. So that's the simple information for just doing allocating expenses. And once again, that's probably what's used most often, is to do that situation. And I have it set up where I could do Arizona to Canada and Canada to the US and so forth, but I'm just going to work out of the US. Here, I'm going to go back in here. So the next one I want to do is intercompany journal. So I might have something where, and let me just delete these lines. I might have something where I'm doing it on a regular basis and I'm allocating out payroll or something like that that's not necessarily part of an invoice, but just allocating out particular information. So I have set up, because NAV does not have a recurring intercompany journal, I have an Excel spreadsheet set up that has the information that I want to put in, and I don't want to have to retype it each time. So those that are on the more current version of the product, you know, you can have your columns lined up. I can select to copy the information, come back into my information here, journal. I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste my rows. Oh, I think it's got a problem because that's there. Let me see here. It should just copy. I probably should have left those entries there. Their company. There we go. So I did have it actually fail on purpose, just to kind of show a little bit of the copy rows and paste rows. It does validate when it's coming in that you actually have a true GL account number. All right, so I'm going to say okay, and maybe I just fat fingered this information here where it was offsetting to, or I don't have it set up actually. So I'm going to go in and, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to copy from above and I'm just going to take that additional information so I don't have to retype it. But everybody always asks, does the paste row really validate the information as it's coming in? And it does. All right, so I did this journal entry. I'm in the US company. Once again, I put in my data information. Who am I sending it out to? Cronus, Arizona. What am I sending out to of them? So these are the values. I'm balancing it out to these different accounts. So that's my cleaning account, that's postage, that's phone and fax, and once again, phone and fax. So I'm allocating the expenses out to them, setting my document numbers here. So I'm going to go ahead and post my journal. Well, oh, okay, because I have done some other journal posting. So I apologize for that. I'm going to get an error that I'm going to have to fix it behind the scenes. So what it does is it posts the journal, puts it in the outbox. I push it out, then I comes to the inbox in Arizona, and it actually will just go ahead and create it as a journal in the other system. So I apologize for that. Let me actually see if I can just paste that in real quick in Arizona, and we can ship it to maybe Canada. So let's see if we can do this one. Paste rows. Oh, I won't be able to do Canada because all my lines are different. Let me just see if I can just type it in, refresh. And we're going to just ship this. And we'll do one more. And let's see if we post. So that was my intercompany general journal. I'm going to go to my outbox. There are my two entries. So once again, I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say send to intercompany, and yes. Oh, I'm not sure. Once again, I'm probably missing something on my setup. So it would normally just send the information over. So that's the journals. But so the next area I want to cover is I'm just going to go ahead and cover the actually selling something to another company versus just allocating the expense out. And that's the last piece that we're going to cover here. So I'm going to go down here to a sales invoice. And what I did in the system already was I created a sales invoice, but I created a customer that is actually intercompany customer. All right, so I went down here and I created one for Canada. So the difference with this customer compared to all the others, as I layer down in here, is I've assigned it an intercompany partner code. So Canada is assigned to intercompany partner for Canada, that's the 03. You can only have one customer or one vendor per intercompany partner. So you can't have 4 different customers that you sell to that all point to Canada. It is a one-to-one relationship. All right, so you cannot have it have more than one assignment. All right, so then I went ahead and I already put in my inventory items and my information. So now I'm good to post this transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and post it. And this was just dealing with inventory. I didn't do anything special on the inventory side. All I did was set up the customer to say that it was an intercompany customer. So if I come down here and I go to my GL registers, go to the last transaction posted, come down here. So it really just sold it out to my intercompany customer and the revenue. All right, then I did my costing in this transaction here. Come back to home. If I go to my roll center, go to the outbox, there it says I have a sales document. What the document was, what do I want to do with it? I want to push that sales document over to my intercompany partner. Now I come down here. Once again, I'm going to go to Canada. I go to the intercompany inbox, and there it says it's a purchase document now because they had the bicycle parts, they sold them out of the US, and I am purchasing them in Canada. So I can, if I wanted to, see the details of the information. So the detail brings it up, shows me the actual invoice. All right, and the Canadian side, I've already set up the US as an intercompany vendor. So I'm going to go ahead and accept it, complete the actions. Even though it has the same information for journals, it also is just going to create a document for me. So I can come over here. I go to purchase invoices. There's my intercompany Canada, edit, and then it has all of the inventory down here. So once again, it allows me to move the information from one company to the other, and I'm not retyping it in, I'm not redoing the cost, I'm not checking the dimensions. Everything is pushed over as it needs to be pushed over, and then you can just go ahead and post it. It even fills in the invoice number for me so that I don't have to put that information in the system. And there it posts the transaction through. So that's another one that's done. This one is not done as much, like I said, as the other ones where it's allocating the expenses out. That's normally the one that's done most often. Now, the last area with the intercompany, as I said, there is a complete audit trail, is they have what's called handled intercompany inboxes and outboxes. So handled in NAV is very similar to posting. So this is the inbox. So it handled transactions from the US company. It tells you what type of transaction. So there are some journals that were done in the purchase document. I can also navigate to see the details of it, and it brings me up and shows me the information again. And it also will tell me if the status was that I had just brought it into the system or if I canceled it and so forth. So it does show me that information back and forth. And then if I have anything that's sent out, so there's my different partners that it sent information out. And once again, I could look at the details. And then one of the other things is you can recreate the transaction. So if you accidentally cancel the transaction or you tell it not to send or send it back, then it will let you recreate it to push the information back. All right, so intercompany is, once again, it's involved in the setup. You definitely have to make sure that all the pieces are there, all the dimensions are there, the partners are set up, and that you're pushing the information back and forth. But I have many companies that use a lot of intercompanies. I have some that have 80 plus companies, and they do intercompanies all month long. They're moving journal entries, allocating expenses. It just eliminates someone having to type it in twice. So that's the important part with dealing with the intercompany. Like I said, there's the complete audit trail, cost efficient, and so forth. So the next thing, so that's all on the intercompany side of it. So I just want to make sure that you have this information on the screen here. It's my direct number, also Mary's direct number if you have questions, which we can certainly answer any. You might have questions as you go along. Just a reminder, there is a NAV support email at SBS Group USA that both Mary and I monitor. So if somebody has a question, you're welcome to go ahead and send it there, and then also the sbsgroupusa.com website. So I don't know, Chris, if there was any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. There aren't any questions right now. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or question box right now. But I just want to give a big thanks to Diana and Mary for presenting. Again, if you don't have any questions right now, but you think you might have in the future, you can use the email or phone numbers on your screen that you see on your screen now. Or you can always email us at info@sbsgroupusa.com. You can always find more information about Dynamics NAV on our website, www.sbsgroupusa.com. So it doesn't look like there are any questions. So thanks again, Diana and Larry, and everyone else. Have a great rest of your day. And thanks again for joining.
Thank you.